4 more weeks left of fantasy football, and these are the quarterback rankings for the rest of the way here. The first guy I'm going to have rest of season rankings is Patrick Mahomes of the Kansas City Chiefs. This guy, each and every week, he puts up big games, and he's been the most consistent quarterback in fantasy football this year, I believe, Mahomes. He only really had one bad game where he had 13 fantasy points versus the Denver Broncos a few weeks ago, and now his remaining 4 games, he does versus the same Bronco team in Kansas City week 13, week 14 at Miami, week 15 at New Orleans, and week 16 in versus Atlanta. So Mahomes here, this Chief team, high-powered offense, one of the best or the best in all of football. And this team, believe it or not, they're going to be playing till the end. They're going to try to win every game till the end to lock up that first seed, even though the Pittsburgh Steelers are undefeated. So Mahomes in this team, they sent the message the other night versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers with a huge ball game. Mahomes, he had 300 yards in the first half, and Tyreek Hill, he was just burning those Tampa Bay defenders left and right down the field. And Mahomes, great schedule coming up, and like I said, they're going to try to win every game, and hopefully the Steelers lose a few that they could get that first round bye and the home field advantage. Number 2, Russell Wilson of the Seattle Seahawks. Wilson, he got off to an insane start, an MVP pace to start the season, but now he slowed down the last 2 or 3 weeks to still good fantasy numbers, but not Wilson-esque numbers. And now week 13, he's got the Giants, week 14, the Jets, week 15 at Washington, and week 16 versus Los Angeles. So he's got a slam dunk schedule coming up the rest of the way is Wilson, where he could have a few fantasy ball games over 40 to 50 fantasy points, I believe, especially with the Giants and Jets coming into town in week 13 and 14. Wilson, an incredible season he still had, even though he struggled with some turnovers and mediocre games the last few weeks. But I'm firing this guy up as the number 2 quarterback for the rest of the season here is Russell Wilson. Number 3, Aaron Rodgers of the Green Bay Packers. Rodgers, what a season it's been for him. And this guy coming into the season, I saw him go in fantasy drafts about 10th to 12th round range. And this guy, he's top 3 in fantasy points for all quarterbacks. He's had 30-plus fantasy games now for the last 6 or 7 weeks in a row, Rodgers. And now his schedule just gets even easier, in my opinion. Philly in week 13, week 14 at Detroit, week 15 Carolina, week 16 Tennessee. So Aaron Rodgers, a very favorable matchup. This Packer team, they're trying to be the best in the NFC and get that bye as well. And with this schedule and the way he's playing and the guys coming back from injury of late with Aaron Jones healthy, Jamal Williams now, Lazard, Aquarius Brown getting worked into the offense, Rodgers here, I could see him having the 3rd best ranking for the rest of the way for quarterbacks. And yeah, I might get some heat for it not putting Murray or Watson there. But I just think Rodgers has been a little more consistent and he's making more plays as the weeks go on. Number 4 is Kyler Murray of the Arizona Cardinals. Murray, he had a horrible ball game to his standards versus the New England Patriots here in week 12. But Murray, he's been an MVP candidate most of the season, and he's had a couple ball games over 40 fantasy points this year. And this guy, he's a dual threat. He's one of the best running quarterbacks in all of football. This guy's got a big arm. Just the thing with him at times, he holds that ball too much, and that's where Murray gets in trouble, throwing picks or just incomplete passes. But Murray here, he's got good schedule coming up. He's got the Rams in week 13, then at the Giants in week 14, Philadelphia week 15, San Francisco week 16. So Kyler Murray, good schedule, 2 division matchups in there as well. But this guy, he is matchup proof. He's a guy you're going to start each and every week. And he's a guy that he could possibly win the MVP if this Arizona team goes on a crazy run in the next few weeks. But I'm going to keep him here as a safe guy at number 4. Number 5, Deshaun Watson of the Houston Texans. I sound like a broken record, but ever since Bill O'Brien got shown the door in Houston, this guy, he's balled out and he's put up huge fantasy numbers now. With 4 or 5 30-plus point fantasy games over the last few weeks. He had a huge ball game on Thanksgiving was Watson with 40 fantasy points. And now week 13 he's got Indy. Week 14 at Chicago, Week 15 at Indy again, and Week 16 Cincinnati. Pretty tough schedule, even though we saw Indianapolis get torched in yesterday's ball game by Ryan Tannehill and the Tennessee Titans. But Watson, he's another quarterback that's matchup proof. You got to start this guy each and every week. He could put up top 1 to 5 numbers each and every week. It just depends what happens. And Watson, he's getting the job done. Got Watson at 5. Number 6, Justin Herbert of the Los Angeles Chargers. Yesterday probably was one of the worst games for Herbert in fantasy football. He only had 18 fantasy points. But Herbert, he's still going to throw the ball around a lot. He got another huge weapon back in Austin Eckler this week. Hopefully he stays healthy. He had 11 catches out of the backfield for Herbert and the Chargers. And now he's got New England in Week 13. Pretty tough matchup. Atlanta in Week 14. They give up the most fantasy points to quarterbacks. Vegas in Week 15 in Vegas. And then Week 16 Denver. So Justin Herbert, pretty solid schedule. I like 3 out of those 4 matchups coming up from him. And this guy, his team's going to be trailing in most of the games, it seems like. He's got good weapons in Keenan Allen, Hunter Henry, and Austin Eckler, and Mike Williams. So Herbert, pretty good schedule, like I said, and he's going to keep throwing. Yesterday was just a little hiccup. I think he's going to bounce back and have a good rest of the way. Herbert, he's been putting up top 5 numbers pretty much each and every week since he's been the starter. Number 7, Josh Allen of the Buffalo Bills. Allen, yesterday, a mediocre ball game with 21 fantasy points. But Allen, he's been pretty good most of the season. He had a 2 or 3 week stretch where his numbers were mediocre as well. But with this guy's running ability and the strong arm and the weapons he has there, I like it for Allen to be the 7th best quarterback the rest of the way. He's at San Francisco in Week 13, Week 14 Pittsburgh, at Denver Week 15, and Week 16 at New England. So Allen, 3 road games out of 4. You know he's going to throw a lot. His running game's pretty much non-existent over there in Buffalo with Devin Singletary and Zach Moore. So this guy, he's going to have a lot of throws. He runs the ball, even sometimes catches the ball out of the backfield. We saw it a few weeks ago, him catching a touchdown. So Josh Allen, he's going to be a big part of the offense, and he's going to have some big games, I think, down the stretch here for the last 4 weeks of the season. Number 8, Big Ben Roethlisberger of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Like I say a lot, as the weeks go on and towards the end of the season winds down, this guy has big fantasy games, and he's got great matchups coming up. He's got Washington in Week 13, Week 14 at Buffalo, Week 15 at Cincy, and Week 16 Indy. I know this Steeler team, they might say they're not, but they're trying to go undefeated here. And you know Big Ben, in possibly his last season of his career, he wants to go undefeated in the regular season and ultimately end the season winning a Super Bowl. So this Steeler team, they're going to keep their foot on the gas. And Big Ben, he's got top weapons in this league with Juju Smith-Schuster, Chase Claypool, Deontay Johnson, and James Conner, and Eric Ebron. So Big Ben, he's got the weapons. He's got great matchups. I like 3 out of the 4 of them. He might just have one tough one in this. And I think he's going to be a safe guy to have here at number 8 for rest of the season at quarterback. Number 9, Lamar Jackson of the Baltimore Ravens. He's been a huge fantasy bust. I don't know if it's the Madden curse either or what, but Jackson, he's just not putting up the numbers you expected him to put up after drafting him, you know, in your 2nd or 3rd round. I've seen this guy go in many fantasy drafts, and he's definitely not putting those numbers up. I think he's 15th in points for quarterbacks. It's been a horrible year for Jackson. He's coming off COVID, but this guy's schedule is one of the best schedules I could see the rest of the way, which I see here. He's got Dallas in Week 13, at Cleveland Week 14, then he's got Jacksonville Week 15, and then the Giants Week 16. So Jackson, I think he could have huge fantasy games and make up for a bad season here with 4 strong games the rest of the way. Baltimore, they're trying to fight in to get into the playoffs, and it's been a tough season for them. But these 4 games, I could see them win, and I could see Jackson finally break loose in the running game. And that's been the problem this year with Jackson. He's not getting those huge rushing games. Teams are forcing him to throw. They got QB spies on the field, 1 or 2 of them, watching Jackson each and every play. So that's why he's not running for those big ball games, is Lamar Jackson. But I could see him finally break out. And at number 9, I think it's a pretty safe spot to put him here for the rest of the season rankings. Number 10, Tom Brady of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Brady, he had a decent ball game yesterday, even though his team took a bad loss versus the Kansas City Chiefs, and Brady finally goes on by in Week 13. But then after that, I think Brady and this Buck team, they're going to break out and finish the season strong. And Brady, he's got great matchups coming up. Week 14, Minnesota. Week 15 at Atlanta. And Week 16 at Detroit. Those are 3 matchups where Brady, he could have huge games with over 300 yards and 3 touchdowns in those. Brady, he's still going to be very useful for fantasy. And he's a guy I really can't bench unless I have one of these top 9 options ahead of him the rest of the way. But if you're looking to pick up a guy over the wire and starting Brady, that's going to be a mistake, because these 3 games he's got, like I said, in 14, 15, and 16, I could see him have huge games and possibly lead you to a championship and win the whole thing. So I got Brady at 10. Number 11, Ryan Tannehill. This guy, he struggled for the last few weeks, but now the last 2 weeks after that, he's back in the groove. He's got over 20 fantasy points. He had a good ball game versus the Indianapolis Colts with 2 touchdowns yesterday, and now he's got Cleveland at Jacksonville, Detroit, and at Green Bay the rest of the way in weeks 13, 14, 15, and 16 for Tannehill. His team's getting it going. A.J. Brown, he's breaking out this season. What a year it's been for him. Corey Davis, he's been a nice number 2 over there. And Derrick Henry is Derrick Henry. He opens up the whole offense. And Henry, like I said in my running back video, he's going to be the best running back the rest of the way in fantasy football. But right here, I got Tannehill at 11. He's got good weapons. He's got a good schedule. Favorable matchups, I believe, in all 4 games. So he's number 11. Number 12, Matt Ryan, the Atlanta Falcons. Ryan, he looked decent yesterday with no Julio Jones. And let's hope Julio Jones comes back from injury after hurting that hamstring and sitting out in Week 12. But Ryan, he's got a good schedule. He's got New Orleans in Week 13, at the Chargers Week 14, Week 15 Tampa Bay, and at Kansas City in Week 16. So most of those games, they're going to be close games. Those are games where I see Ryan throwing the football anywhere from 35 to 40 times, trying to win the game and keep his team in it. And since the coaching change of Dan Quinn being gone and Morris being the head coach, Ryan and this Falcon offense, they've looked good, they've played confident, and they're making plays. And Ryan, he's definitely a top 12 option, I believe, here the rest of the way, and a guy you could believe in and start, especially in the playoffs. He's got Chargers, Tampa Bay, and Kansas City. Those are teams where you could put up numbers, even if it's in garbage time. He's going to have a decent stat line and fantasy numbers. Number 13, Kirk Cousins of the Minnesota Vikings. Cousins, he's been going off the last 3 or 4 weeks now, and this Viking team, they've won a lot of ball games as well, winning 4 out of their last 5 to get them back into the race, sort of, for a playoff spot. And Cousins in Week 13's got Jacksonville, Week 14 at Tampa Bay, Week 15 at Chicago, Week 16 at New Orleans for Kirk Cousins. So Cousins and the Vikings, they got good matchups. They got a good schedule. On Cousins, he's got 2 of the top 15 wide receivers on his roster in Adam Thielen and Justin Jefferson, and he's got a top 3 running back on his team as well in Dalvin Cook. So the outlook looks good for Cousins. He's got great weapons. He's got a pretty favorable schedule the rest of the way, and this is a guy I could put in my lineup confidently here the rest of the way is Kirk Cousins. So I got him at 13. Number 14, Phillip Rivers of the Indianapolis Colts. Rivers, as the week's gone on, he's getting more comfortable with this offense here in Indianapolis, and he's got a good matchups coming up as well at Houston in Week 13, at Vegas Week 14, Houston again in Week 15, and at Pittsburgh Week 16. So pretty good matchups, 3 out of the 4 games. He's got a good rapport with his tight ends over there. It seems like a tight end scores each and every week. He's got one of the best third down backs in all football in Nyheim Hines. He's got Michael Pittman, an up-and-coming rookie. T.Y. Hilton, he got back in the mix a little as well. So Rivers here, he's got a decent amount of weapons. He's been throwing. He's got over 20 fantasy points now the last 4 or 5 ball games. And Rivers, he's a veteran. You know, these are big games for him. His team's in a playoff hunt, and I think he could put numbers up. So I got him in number 14. And the 15th and final quarterback I got ranked for the rest of the season's Matthew Stafford the Detroit Lions. The Lions, they're going to be trailing in a lot of games. And Stafford, he's good at getting those garbage time touchdowns. And he's got plenty of weapons as well over there. He's got Chicago, though, in Week 13 in Chicago. Green Bay Week 14 at Tennessee Week 15. And Week 16 Tampa Bay. So Matthew Stafford, like I said, he's got pretty good matchups. Lions, they're out of it. They fired their head coach and GM. But Stafford, he's still going to put the ball up. He's got weapons. Hopefully Kenny Golladay comes back. He's got Swift, TJ Hawkinson, and Marvin Jones. So this guy, he's a guy you could play on some weeks. And like I said, he's putting up 20-plus fantasy points pretty much each and every week. And sometimes, you know how Stafford is. He has that big 400-plus fantasy yard game. So Stafford, I got him in number 15. So that's 15 quarterbacks I'm ranking. And their rankings the rest of the season for fantasy football.